The massive space station called Nexus Prima floated in the darkness between stars. It was bigger than most cities on Earth, with tall towers that spiraled upward like metal trees. Ships from dozens of different worlds docked at its ports every day. This was the heart of galactic power, where the Council made decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. Ambassador Jiho Park stood at the window of his small quarters, watching alien ships come and go. He had been a diplomat for 20 years, but this was his first time representing Earth at the galactic level. The responsibility felt heavy on his shoulders. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 5 years, and most species still saw them as primitive newcomers. "Sir, the morning briefing files are ready," said a young voice behind him. Jiho turned to see Yuna Kim, his aide and translator. At 19, she was the youngest person ever sent on a diplomatic mission. This important. But Yuna had a gift that amazed everyone who met her. She could learn any alien language in weeks, sometimes days. More than that, she understood how different species thought and felt. "Thank you, Yuna," Jiho said. "Are you ready for today's session?" Yuna nodded, though her dark eyes showed concern. "I've been studying the hegemony's recent statements about trade routes. Something feels wrong about their arguments. They keep using words that mean different things in their formal language versus their casual speech." This was why Jiho valued her so much. While other diplomats focused on obvious meanings, Yuna caught the hidden messages that species tried to hide behind their words. The council chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circles that rose up like steps. Each species had their own section designed for their particular body types. The humans sat in a small area near the back, marked by simple chairs that looked plain compared to the elaborate seating of older civilizations. Today's session was about trade agreements and shipping lanes. On the surface, it seemed boring. But Jiho knew that control of trade routes meant control of power in the galaxy. Earth needed these agreements to grow and prosper. The hegemony representative, a tall being called Vextar, stood to speak. His species looked almost human, but with gray skin and eyes that reflected light like mirrors. He spoke in the common galactic language, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "The new trade proposals from Earth show their lack of understanding," Vextar said. "Young species often make mistakes when they try to expand too quickly. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if Earth focused on their own system for a few more decades." Other council members made sounds of agreement. The Confederation delegate nodded with their 3 heads. The collective's representative flashed patterns of light that meant approval in their visual language. Yuna leaned close to Jiho and whispered, "He's not talking about trade routes." In hegemony formal speech, the words he's using actually refer to containment and isolation. He's suggesting they cut Earth off from the galaxy. Jiho felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about business. This was about keeping humanity trapped in their own solar system. When it was Earth's turn to speak, Jiho stood and addressed the council. He talked about mutual benefits and shared prosperity. He explained how Earth's unique perspectives could help solve galactic problems. But he could see in the alien faces around him that most had already made up their minds. After the session ended, Yuna stayed behind to review the official recordings. She often did this, looking for details that others missed. Jiho went back to their quarters to prepare reports for Earth. Hours later, Yuna came running into his room, her face pale with fear. "Ambassador, I found something terrible," she said, her voice shaking. "I was reviewing the audio files when I discovered a secondary channel. The council members were having a private conversation during the session. She played a recording on her tablet. The voices were in different alien languages, but Yuna had translated them into English subtitles. 'The human expansion must be stopped,' said one voice that Yuna identified as Vextar. 'Their unpredictable nature makes them dangerous to galactic stability.' Another voice from the Confederation replied, 'Agreed, but direct military action would be difficult to justify to our populations.' 'An incident could be arranged,' Vextar suggested. 'Something that shows how violent and unstable humans can be. If one of their diplomats were to attack council security, we would have justification for stronger measures.' Yuna looked at Jiho with wide, frightened eyes. They're planning to frame someone from our delegation. They want to make it look like we're violent so they can isolate Earth or worse. Jiho felt his blood turn cold. We need to warn Earth immediately, and we need to get our people to safety. I'll contact the ship, Yuna said, reaching for her communicator. Before she could activate it, the door to their quarters slid open. Vextar stood in the entrance with 4 armed guards behind him. His mirror-like eyes reflected the room's lights as he smiled. I'm afraid there's been a security concern, he said in his smooth voice. We need to conduct interviews with all human personnel. Jiho stepped forward. Under galactic law, you need proper authorization to detain diplomatic staff. Of course, Vextar said, producing a datapad. All paperwork is in order. We'll start with the young translator. Her access to classified communication systems makes her a priority. Yuna grabbed Jiho's arm. Don't let them take me, she whispered. I know what they're planning. But the guards moved forward and Jiho realized they were outnumbered. I demand to accompany my aide, he said. I'm afraid that's not possible, Vextar replied. Security protocols require individual interviews. She'll be returned safely once we've cleared up these concerns. As the guards escorted Yuna away, she looked back at Jiho with terror in her eyes. Tell Earth the truth, she called out. No matter what happens, tell them the truth. The door closed, leaving Jiho alone in the suddenly quiet room. He sat down heavily in his chair, staring at Yuna's tablet that still displayed the translated conversation. Outside his window, the lights of Nexus Prima continued to twinkle like distant stars. He didn't know it yet, but in 12 hours, everything would change. The Council thought they were dealing with just another primitive species that could be manipulated and controlled. They had no idea that by touching one young human who only wanted to help others understand each other, they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The Council expected angry messages from Earth. They prepared formal responses about regrettable incidents and the need for better security protocols. What they got instead was silence for 3 days, followed by something no species in galactic history had ever experienced. At exactly 14:00 Galactic Standard Time, human ships appeared in 12 different star systems simultaneously. They weren't the small exploration vessels the Council knew about. These were sleek, dark ships that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. They moved with precision that made veteran military commanders nervous. On the hegemony homeworld, Colonel Unji Song sat in the command chair of the ship called Silent Arrow. Through the view screen, she could see the massive data center that controlled the hegemony's entire government. It was a beautiful building, all curved lines and glowing panels floating above the planet's surface on anti-grav generators. Target confirmed, said her tactical officer. The hegemony central data nexus. All their financial records, legal databases, and administrative systems run through that facility. Colonel Song nodded. Any military response? 3 patrol ships approaching, but they're not taking aggressive positions. They think we're here to negotiate. Colonel Song almost laughed. The hegemony still believed humans followed their rules about formal declarations and diplomatic protocols. They had no idea that humans had been studying their weaknesses for 5 years. Send them the standard diplomatic immunity signal, she ordered. Then execute the plan. The human ship moved closer to the data center, broadcasting the codes that identified it as a diplomatic vessel. The hegemony patrol ships maintained a respectful distance, probably confused but not yet alarmed. Quantum penetration successful, reported the tech specialist. We're inside their security systems. Colonel Song watched the countdown timer on her screen. In 17 minutes, they would demonstrate to the galaxy that humans didn't fight like other species. Other species attacked military targets, conquered territory, or demanded tribute. Humans attacked the things their enemies couldn't live without. Execute, she said quietly. The virus spread through the hegemony's data systems like wildfire through dry grass. But it wasn't designed to destroy information randomly. Human programmers had spent months studying how the hegemony organized their society, and they had created something much more sophisticated than a simple weapon. The virus selectively deleted specific types of data. It erased financial records but left personal messages alone. It removed government databases but preserved scientific research. It eliminated military command codes but kept cultural archives intact. Within minutes, the hegemony government simply stopped functioning. Officials couldn't access their accounts, commanders couldn't verify orders, and administrators couldn't find their files. 3,000 years of bureaucratic structure vanished like morning mist. Meanwhile, in the Confederation's primary system, Commander Hyunwoo John was demonstrating humanity's most frightening capability. His ship hung motionless, near the Confederation's main communication relay, a massive structure that connected hundreds of worlds. "Sir, we've successfully infiltrated their quantum communication network," his communications officer reported. "The logic virus is ready for deployment." Commander John had spent 2 years studying how different alien species thought. The Confederation made all their decisions through a complex voting system that required perfect logic and mathematical precision. They literally couldn't function if they doubted their own reasoning. "Deploy the virus," he ordered. The logic virus was Dr. Soyoung Han's masterpiece. Instead of attacking computer systems, it attacked the way alien minds processed information. It introduced tiny contradictions and impossibilities into their data streams, things so subtle that most species wouldn't even notice them. But the Confederation's minds were built for perfect logic. When they encountered information that didn't quite make sense, they couldn't ignore it. They had to resolve the contradiction. And while they were trying to figure out something that had no solution, they couldn't make any other decisions. Across Confederation space, entire governments ground to a halt as their leaders became paralyzed by unsolvable logical puzzles hidden in their daily reports. Back on Nexus Prima, Ambassador Jiho walked into the council chamber carrying a simple message. Tablet. The emergency session had been called when reports started coming in from across the galaxy. Council members spoke in urgent whispers, their translator devices working overtime to handle the multiple conversations. Vextar, the hegemony representative, who had killed Yuna, stood at the center podium looking confused and angry. "We demand an explanation for these attacks on civilian infrastructure," he said. "This is a violation of every galactic treaty." Jiho walked slowly to the human speaking area. Every eye in the chamber followed him. He looked small and ordinary, compared to the impressive alien delegates around him, but something about his calm demeanor made everyone nervous. "You want an explanation?" Jiho said, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "Here it is." He activated his message tablet. Yuna Kim's voice filled the chamber, speaking the words she had recorded just before her death. "Tell Earth the truth. No matter what happens, tell them the truth." "That was the last thing my aide said before your security chief murdered her," Jiho continued. "She was 19 years old. She learned your languages because she wanted to understand you. She discovered your plan to frame Earth for violence and you killed her for it." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates looked shocked, others uncomfortable. Vextar's mirror-like eyes reflected the chamber lights as he prepared to respond. "That's a serious accusation," he began. "It's not an accusation," Jiho interrupted, playing the recording Yuna had discovered. The council members' own voices filled the chamber, discussing their plan to arrange an incident with human diplomats. The chamber erupted in shocked voices and angry denials. But Jiho wasn't finished. "You killed our child to send us a message," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "So here's our message to you." He looked directly at Vextar. "You think you understand humans because you've studied us for 5 years? You think we're just another species that can be intimidated or controlled? You're wrong." The chamber fell, silent again. "We're not like you," Jiho continued. "We don't fight for territory or resources or political advantage. We fight for principle. We fight for memory. We fight for the idea that some things are sacred." He gestured to his tablet, where Yuna's photo was displayed. "You killed a girl who wanted to help others understand each other. Now watch your civilization forget how to exist." With that, Ambassador Jiho turned and walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a room full of alien delegates who were just beginning to understand what they had awakened. Across the galaxy, human ships continued their work. They didn't destroy planets or kill populations. Instead, they surgically removed the foundations that alien civilizations depended on. Communication networks went silent. Administrative systems forgot how to function. Military command structures dissolved into confusion. The Council had expected a primitive species to beg for justice and eventually accept their explanation. Instead, they got a demonstration of what happened when you hurt something that humans considered innocent and pure. The war had begun, but it wasn't a war the galaxy had ever seen before. The news reached Earth 18 hours after Yuna Kim died in Council custody. Ambassador Jiho Park's message was short and filled with pain. The Council claimed it was an accident during questioning. They said she had attacked a guard and was killed in self-defense. But Jiho knew the truth, and now so did Earth. President Min-ho Choi sat in the emergency meeting room deep beneath the Capitol building. Around the table were the most powerful people on the planet. But today they all looked small and lost. On the main screen was a photo of Yuna Kim, smiling as she held her certificate from the Diplomatic Academy. She had been so young, so full of hope about bringing species together. "Show me the recording again," President Choi said quietly. General, Taehyun Lee played the audio file that Yuna had discovered. The council members' voices filled the room, speaking casually about arranging an incident, about making humans look violent and dangerous. They had planned to kill someone from Earth's delegation all along. "They murdered a child to send us a message," said Dr. So-Young-hun, the head of Earth's Science Division. Her voice was calm, but her hands shook with anger. A 19-year-old girl who spent her life learning their languages because she wanted to understand them. President Choi stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the city looked peaceful. People went about their daily lives, not knowing that everything was about to change. "How long before the Council expects our response?" he asked. "Based on their experience with other species, probably weeks of angry messages and demands for justice," said Admiral Taehyun Lee. "They think we'll follow their diplomatic protocols and eventually accept their version of events." The president turned back to the room. "They don't know us very well, do they?" Admiral Lee smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "No, sir, they don't. They've been studying us for 5 years, but they only saw what we wanted them to see." President Choi nodded. "Activate Dark Sky. Full authorization." Around the table, faces grew serious. Project Dark Sky was Earth's deepest secret, known only to a few dozen people. For the past 5 years, while humanity played the role of eager junior members of the galactic community, they had been preparing for exactly this moment. Dr. Han pulled up classified files on her tablet. "All research teams are standing by. We've been reverse engineering every piece of Council technology they've shared with us, but more than that, we've been studying them." "What did we learn?" President Choi asked. "They're predictable," Dr. Han said. "Every species in the Council evolved to value order, logic, and stability. They make decisions based on careful analysis and established patterns. It makes them excellent administrators and engineers." "But," the president prompted, "but it also makes them vulnerable. They can't understand chaos, creativity, or illogical actions. When they study humans, they try to fit us into their logical patterns. They miss our most important trait." "Which is?" Dr. Han looked directly at the president. "We're the only species in the galaxy that evolved as both predators and social creatures. We can cooperate perfectly and then switch to complete violence without warning. Other species either fight constantly or never fight at all. We're unique." Admiral Lee opened his own files. "Dark Sky isn't just about weapons, though we have those too. It's about thinking like humans instead of trying to think like them." He showed pictures of sleek ships hidden in asteroid fields throughout the solar system. "While the Council thinks our fleet is just a few dozen exploration vessels, we actually have over 3,000 ships ready for combat. But they're not designed to fight fair." "What do you mean?" asked President Choi. "Council warfare is formal and predictable. They announce their intentions, follow established battle patterns, and fight for territory or resources. Human warfare is about breaking the enemy's will to fight. We don't want their territory. We want them to regret what they did." Kiden. Dongyun Kang entered the room carrying a secure briefcase. Sir, all fleet commanders are in position. We have ships in 12 council systems disguised as merchant vessels and research probes. They have no idea we're there. President Choi looked around the room one more time. Are we sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. Dr. Han stood up. Mr. President, they killed a child who wanted to help them. They planned it in advance, and they'll do it again to other species that don't fit their patterns. The galaxy needs to learn that there are consequences for murdering innocents. And if we lose? Admiral Lee answered. Sir, we've been preparing for 5 years. We know their weaknesses, their technology, and their psychology. They know almost nothing about our real capabilities. The only way we lose is if we don't have the courage to show them who we really are. President Choi made his decision. Send the message to all council worlds. Tell them what really happened to Yuna Kim, then show them what happens when someone hurts our children. Across the galaxy, human ships received their orders simultaneously. They weren't orders to attack military targets or capture territory. They were orders to do something the council had never seen before, make their enemies afraid of what they didn't understand. On Nexus Prima, Ambassador Jiho received a message from Earth. It was simple and direct. Come home, bring Yuna. We'll handle the rest. For the first time since his aide's death, Jiho smiled. The council thought they were dealing with another logical, predictable species that would eventually accept their explanation and move on. They had no idea that humans didn't think like other species. Other species fought for land, resources, or political advantage. Humans fought for ideas, for principles, for the memory of a young girl who died trying to build bridges between worlds. The Tew Council was about to learn that there was something worse than an enemy who wanted to destroy you. There was an enemy who wanted to teach you a lesson you would never forget. In the depths of space, human ships began moving toward their targets. They carried weapons the Council had never seen, strategies the Council couldn't predict, and a rage that burned cold and patient and absolutely deadly. Yuna Kim had wanted to help different species understand each other. Now, in the worst possible way, she was going to succeed. The Council's response was exactly what Earth had predicted. Fleet Admiral Zexthul of the Grand Armada received emergency authorization to end the human problem permanently. Within hours, the largest military force in galactic history began, moving toward Earth's solar system. 10,000 warships from a dozen different species formed a massive fleet that stretched across space like a metal constellation. Each ship was larger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built, at least according to Council intelligence reports. The fleet represented the combined military might of civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. Admiral Zexthul stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel called Eternal Dominion. He was proud of his forearms and golden scales that marked him as one of the most successful military commanders in Council history. He had conquered 17 worlds and put down dozens of rebellions. Dealing with one primitive species should be simple. How long until we reach their system? He asked his navigation officer. 12 hours at maximum warp, Admiral. Our scouts report minimal defensive preparations. They appear to have fewer than 50 ships protecting their homeworld. Admiral, Zexthul made the sound his species used for laughter. 50 ships against 10,000. This will be over quickly. What the Admiral didn't know was that humans had been watching his fleet since the moment it left Council space. Dr. Jinwoo Park, Yuna's older brother, sat in a hidden facility on Earth's moon, monitoring every movement of the approaching armada. Jinwoo had spent the last 2 years working on Earth's ultimate weapon, driven by a growing certainty that his sister would someday need protection from the galaxy's darker impulses. Now that she was gone, his work had become something else entirely, a monument to her memory built from quantum physics and weaponized chaos. Sir, the Council fleet is maintaining standard formation, reported his assistant. They're following all established military protocols. Jinwoo nodded without looking away from his screens. Of course they are. They're predictable. That's what makes this possible. Around him, technicians worked at stations covered with equipment that looked nothing like traditional weapons. Instead of cannons or missiles, Earth's ultimate defense was based on something much more fundamental: the ability to make other species forget how to be what they were. "Uncertainty field generators are charged and ready," called out Dr. Myung Lim from the weapons control station. "All quantum manipulation. Arrays are online." Jinwoo thought about his sister, about her bright smile and her dream of helping different species understand each other. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was about to use her research into alien psychology to do the opposite of what she had wanted. "Yuna always said that every species thinks differently," he said softly. "She studied those differences because she wanted to build bridges. I studied them because I knew someday we might need to tear those bridges down." 8 hours later, the Council fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of Earth's solar system. Admiral Zexthul expected to see desperate defensive preparations, perhaps a few human ships trying to delay the inevitable. Instead, he found empty space. "Where are their ships?" he demanded. "Unknown, sir. Our sensors detect no military vessels in the immediate area. Scan the inner system. They must be hiding behind their planet's moon or asteroid fields." The scan. Results appeared on his screen moments later. There were indeed human ships in the system, but they weren't positioned for defense. Instead, they were scattered throughout the area in seemingly random locations, making no effort to intercept the Council fleet. "This makes no sense," Admiral Zexthul muttered. "Are they surrendering?" Before his officers could respond, something strange began happening to the fleet. It started with the communication systems. Orders that should have been clear and precise became confusing. Simple commands like "maintain formation" somehow became impossible to understand or follow. "Admiral, we're receiving conflicting signals from the other ships," reported his communications officer. "The hegemony vessels are requesting clarification on our attack patterns, but we haven't sent any attack patterns yet." Admiral Zexthul felt the first stirring of unease. "Clarify our intentions to all fleet commanders." But when he tried to formulate the message, something went wrong. The words that had always come easily to him suddenly felt uncertain. Should they attack immediately, or establish a blockade first? Was their primary objective to capture Earth, or destroy it? These had been clear decisions an hour ago, but now they seemed impossibly complex. Across the fleet, the same thing was happening to every commander and crew member. Species that had evolved to value order and logical thinking found themselves unable to make even simple decisions. The uncertainty field that Dr. Jinwoo had created was doing exactly what it was designed to do, making logical minds doubt everything they thought they knew. "Sir, the fleet formation is breaking apart," his tactical officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. "Ships are requesting new orders, but I can't remember what our current orders were supposed to be." Admiral Zexthul tried to focus, but his thoughts felt scattered and unclear. He knew they were here to attack Earth, but he couldn't remember why Earth needed to be attacked. He knew the humans had done something terrible, but the details kept slipping away from his memory like water through his claws. On Earth's moon, Dr. Jinwoo watched the Council fleet slowly dissolve into chaos. The uncertainty field wasn't destroying their ships or killing their crews. Instead, it was removing their ability to function as an organized military force by attacking the neurological patterns that made logical thinking possible. "Fleet cohesion is down to 30% and falling," reported Dr. Lim. "Most ships are now dead in space waiting for orders that their commanders can't formulate. Any attempts to retreat? Some individual ships are trying to leave, but they can't coordinate with each other. A few Confederation vessels are moving in circles because they can't decide which direction leads back to their space." Jinwoo activated the communication system that connected him to military commands across Earth. "General Myung Lim, this is Dr. Park. The Council fleet is neutralized. You are clear to begin ground operations." "Understood, Dr. Park. All units are moving to Phase 2. While the Council's mighty armada drifted helplessly in space, human ground forces were already at work throughout the galaxy. Using transport ships that had been disguised as merchant vessels for months, they landed on Council worlds and simply walked into government buildings, military bases, and communication centers. There was no resistance. The alien population stood paralyzed by their inability to process what was happening. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia found themselves unable to make decisions, give orders, or even understand what they should be fighting against. General Myung Lim led the occupation of the hegemony homeworld personally. She walked through the capital city streets while confused civilians watched from windows and doorways. The uncertainty field had been calibrated to affect only military and government personnel, but the sight of their leaders standing motionless and helpless had broken the population's will to resist. Hegemony High Command, this is General Lim, of Earth Forces, she announced as she entered their military headquarters. Your fleet is disabled and your government is under new management. Any resistance will result in an expansion of the uncertainty field to include civilian populations. The hegemony commanders stood frozen, unable to decide whether to surrender, fight, or try to negotiate. Their logical minds simply couldn't process a situation where their overwhelming technological and numerical advantages had become meaningless. Back in space, Admiral Zex Thul sat on his command chair, staring at screens. He could no longer understand. His fleet of 10,000 ships had become 10,000 metal sculptures drifting through the void. His crew looked to him for orders he couldn't give, to solve problems he couldn't define. For the first time in galactic history, a species had won a war without firing a shot. They had simply reached into their enemies' minds and removed their ability to be enemies. On Earth, President Min-ho Choi received the final report. The Council's military was neutralized, their governments were occupied, and their leaders were beginning to understand that they faced something beyond their experience or comprehension. "Sir," asked his aide, "what should we tell the galaxy about our victory?" President Choi looked at the photo of Yoona Kim that now hung in his office. "Tell them that a young girl wanted to help them understand us. Now they do." 3 weeks after the Council fleet had drifted helplessly in Earth's solar system, a small ship approached the planet under a white flag of surrender. Inside were the surviving leaders of galactic civilization, coming to beg for mercy from the species they had tried to eliminate. The ship landed at the main spaceport in Earth's capital, watched by millions of humans who had gathered to see their former oppressors arrive as broken supplicants. The alien delegates who emerged looked nothing like the proud rulers who had once commanded the galaxy. Their movements were uncertain, their eyes filled with confusion and fear. Vex Tar, the hegemony security chief who had killed Yoona Kim, walked slowly down the ship's ramp. His mirror-like eyes no longer reflected confidence and authority. Instead, they showed something that had never existed in his species before: doubt about everything he thought he knew. The delegation was escorted to a simple building in the city center. They had expected to meet in grand halls with elaborate ceremonies, the kind of formal surrender rituals that had marked the end of conflicts for thousands of years. Instead, they found themselves in a plain room with ordinary chairs and simple lighting. At one end of the room sat two humans who looked smaller and more fragile than any galactic leader in history. Seokjin Kim wore a simple dark suit that showed his age and grief. Beside him, his wife Nayeon Kim held a photograph of their daughter Yoona, taken on her graduation day from the diplomatic academy. These were not generals or presidents or admirals. They were just two parents who had lost their child. But when the alien delegates saw them, they felt something that their species had never experienced, shame so deep it made their bones ache. "Please, sit down," Seokjin said quietly. His voice carried no anger or hatred, only a sadness that seemed to fill the entire room. The delegates took their seats awkwardly. None of them knew what to say. They had prepared speeches about misunderstandings and the need for reasonable negotiations. But faced with the simple grief of two parents, all their words seemed meaningless. Admiral Zexthul, the former fleet commander, spoke first. We came to discuss terms. The uncertainty field that affects our people. We need it removed, so we can function again." Nayeon Kim looked up from her daughter's photograph. "Tell me about your children," she said. The question surprised everyone in the room. Admiral Zexthul's forearms moved nervously. What do you mean? Your children. Do you have any?" "I have 3 offspring in the military academy on my homeworld." "What are their names?" Admiral Zexthul found himself answering without thinking. "Keksivor, Taysina, and Zaltek. They're training to be officers like their father. Nayeon nodded. Yuna wanted to be a teacher when she was little. Then she discovered that she could learn alien languages faster than anyone had ever seen. She thought it meant she was supposed to help different species understand each other. She held up the photograph so everyone could see her daughter's smiling face. She spent 4 years studying every species in the council, not just your languages, but how you think, what you value, what makes you afraid. She did it because she believed that understanding leads to peace. Vextar shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The incident at the station was regrettable, but it was necessary to maintain galactic stability. Seokjin Kim looked directly at him. My daughter found your secret communications. She knew you were planning to frame Earth for violence, so you killed her to stop her from warning us. She was interfering with council security. She was a child who wanted to prevent a war. Seokjin's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes made every alien in the room want to look away. You murdered her because she threatened your plan to destroy my species. The room fell silent. Outside the windows they could see the city, where humans went about their daily lives apparently unconcerned that the former rulers of the galaxy sat powerless in their midst. President Minho Choi entered the room and took a seat beside Yuna's parents. Unlike them, he did look like a leader, but his authority seemed to come from something deeper than titles or power. Gentlemen, he said, addressing the alien delegates, let me explain your situation. Your military forces are completely neutralized. Your governments cannot function. Your populations are beginning to panic as they realize their leaders can no longer make decisions. He paused to let this sink in. The uncertainty field that affects your minds is permanent, unless we choose to remove it. We can selectively restore your ability to think logically, or we can expand the field to include your entire populations. Admiral Zexthal leaned forward desperately. What do you want? Territory, resources? We can negotiate. We don't want your territory, President Choi said. We don't want your resources. We want you to understand what you did. He gestured to Yuna's parents. You killed an innocent girl because she discovered your plan to commit genocide against Earth. You did it casually, as if her life meant nothing, as if human lives meant nothing. Vexitar tried to speak, but President Choi continued. For 5 years you studied us and decided we were inferior. You made plans to eliminate us or control us because we didn't fit your logical patterns. You never considered that our differences might be strengths instead of weaknesses. Dr. So-Young Han entered the room carrying a data tablet. Would you like to see what we've learned about you while your fleets drifted helplessly in space? She activated the tablet, showing detailed psychological profiles of every species in the room. We know exactly how your minds work. We know what thoughts you can handle and what thoughts will paralyze you with indecision. We know how to make you forget specific information while leaving everything else intact. The delegates looked at the profiles with growing horror. The humans had mapped their neurological patterns with the same precision that the Council had once used to map star systems. The uncertainty field is just one application of this knowledge, Dr. Han continued. We can make you forget how to read, how to speak, how to recognize your own families. We can remove your ability to feel emotions or give you emotions so strong they drive you insane. She looked directly at Vextar. We could make you forget everything except the moment you killed Yuna Kim. You would live that moment over and over, forever, unable to think of anything else. Vextar's mirror-like eyes reflected pure terror. President Choi leaned back in his chair. But we're not going to do any of those things. Do you know why? The delegates shook their heads, afraid to speak. Because Yuna Kim wouldn't want us to. She believed that understanding leads to peace, even with people who had hurt her. So we're going to give you a choice. He stood up and walked to the window. Option 1. We dissolve the Council permanently. You accept Earth's oversight of galactic civilization. War crimes trials will be held for everyone involved in Yuna's death and the planned genocide of humanity. Those found guilty will spend their lives in prison, but they will be treated humanely. The delegates looked at each other with relief. This was better than they had hoped for. Option 2. President Choi continued, turning back to face them. We expand the uncertainty field to cover your entire populations. Every member of your species will forget how to make decisions, how to solve problems, how to function as individuals or groups. You'll be kept alive, but you'll be unable to think clearly enough to suffer. The relief vanished from their faces. You have 1 hour to decide, President Choi said, but understand this. If you choose option 1, you're not just surrendering to Earth. You're accepting that a 19-year-old girl who wanted to help others was worth more than your entire galactic empire. He walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. If you choose option 1, we'll restore your ability to think clearly, but we'll never remove our ability to take it away again. For the rest of galactic history, you'll know that humanity can reach into your minds and turn off your thoughts whenever we choose. As the door closed behind him, the alien delegates sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting to negotiate the terms of a surrender. Instead, they had discovered that they were completely at the mercy of a species they had underestimated, led by parents whose love for their dead daughter had become the foundation of a new galactic order. Outside the window, Earth's sun shone, down on a world that had just become the center of galactic civilization, not through conquest but through the simple principle that some things were too sacred to be destroyed by politics or power.